Let's move on to the squad, Ryan, because this is in some ways a more interesting, not more interesting, a lighter story, because we have poetry from Jamal Bowman involved, we have mistranslations involved, and we have, I guess, security turned husbands involved in all likelihood. Ryan, what is the name of your book, by the way?
The book is called The Squad, and it's going to need, the paperback version is going to need another chapter for everything we're seeing.
Just this week.
Yeah, the context, of course, is that AIPAC is putting together an unprecedented level of spending to try to wipe out the Squad in Congress. Meanwhile, they're facing a cascading number of their own scandals that we'll talk about Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, and Ilhan Omar in this segment. Let's start with Cori Bush. It was reported yesterday that she's under DOJ investigation for over her campaign spending on security. Yeah. She, after the news was broken by Punchbowl, she came out and acknowledged that the investigation is happening and said that she will be found to have done nothing wrong. Let's roll a little bit of Cori Bush here.
I hold myself, my campaign, and my position to the highest levels of integrity. I also believe in transparency, which is why I can confirm that the Department of Justice is reviewing my campaign spending on security services. We are fully cooperating with this investigation, and I would like to take this opportunity to outline the facts and the truth. Since before I was sworn into office, I have endured relentless threats to my physical safety and life. As a rank-and-file member of Congress, I am not entitled to personal protection by the House and instead have used campaign funds as permissible to retain security services. I have not used any federal tax dollars for personal security services. Any reporting that I have used funds for personal security is simply false. In recent months, right-wing organizations have lodged baseless complaints against me, peddling notions that I have misused campaign funds to pay for personal security services. That simply is not true.
So, Emily, what's the best case that you've seen in the right-wing press kind of against her at this point?
Well, it does look like there was, so this can go in a couple of different ways. So from her perspective, she can say, I need to spend a lot of money on security. She had a security guard who turned out into her husband, who she says was making fair market rate. And, it looks like
security is expensive, so it's probably going to be eye-popping number, but go ahead.
Yeah, so she spends more than other people do on security. And okay, but she can make the point that she's a member of the Squad. The Squad is very high profile, and that necessarily means she's probably going to be spending more money on security than your sort of run-of-the-mill member of Congress for being a member of the Squad who has, sort of an ideologically high-profile departure from the political establishment in Washington, D.C. So you can see how that argument in and of itself, can go both ways. She's spending a lot of money on security. Maybe it's because she was, involved with her husband and paying him more than fair market rate. We'll see. I mean, that's what they're investigating. I think it's a perfectly legitimate investigation. I'm glad that she's cooperating with it. We will see how it turns out.
She was previously investigated by the Office of Congressional Ethics.
Currently, they're both investigating it.
I thought that one concluded. Well, she said that they concluded that she had followed the rules.
She says that the House Committee on Ethics are currently reviewing the matter. As yesterday, she said that.
Okay.
So
because previously she'd been reviewed and they had found that she was okay. Maybe now with the new news, they're taking a closer look into it because the DOJ would have access to more information than OCE would.
And you know that the House Ethics Committee is you never really know when their timelines, they're very secretive. They're totally closed off. So maybe there was something else that they were investigating that Cori Bush was aware of. That is what she's referring to there. So again, I mean, we'll see. I don't think we have conclusive evidence in any direction. I'm glad they're investigating it, but this is just so minor. I mean, the allegations are.
We're talking about
so-
war and peace,
Yes.
and then we're going to have a race determined.
Like for members of Congress, I'm saying this as a conservative, like this is not disqualifying whatsoever for members of Congress. Now, the right has made a lot of her being a sort of defund the police person, and a lot of the squad being defund the police people, and then paying higher.
That's a clean hit.
I think that's what I was just going to say. That's a much cleaner hit. So we'll see where this goes. But again, she does have a primary challenge, right, that's being funded by AIPAC.
Well, there's a lot. Yes. What's his name? Wesley Bell was running for Senate. Jumped out of the Senate race and into the House race after October 7th, when it appeared that Bush could be vulnerable to a well-financed challenger. He announced he had raised $600,000. AIPAC has already been spending. AIPAC was spending against her before she had an opponent through its super PAC. So that yes, they're absolutely coming for her. So this will wind up, I think, in all of the super PAC ads. That because Marie Newman, who AIPAC took out in 2022 because she represented a huge kind of Palestinian population in Illinois, had a congressional ethics review underway, and they made that like the focus of their massive spending against her. So if you have 30 seconds and if to do an ad and you got $1 million to spread it, you can make someone look really, really bad. We'll see whether or not people kind of believe it, and also maybe they actually we'll see. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. Maybe they did make some mistakes in how they did this.
Mistakes or intentional funneling of money, but again, this is so. Members of Congress commit so many egregious ethical violations. I say this not. I completely think that they should be looking into it. If there's good journalism in the space, I welcome it, and I welcome the ethics investigation. I'm glad she's fully cooperating. Again, like this is just not on the same level as other congressional ethics.
And there's an interesting class issue here in the sense that Bush was in poverty up until she got her first paycheck, basically as a member of Congress.
She's been homeless.
And wealthy members of Congress, she was in and out of homelessness. Wealthy members of Congress, find ways to get fantastically rich through their quote unquote public service, and their consultants find ways to buy boats with campaign money.
Yeah, that's
and
so true.
They just happen to know the precise legal ways that they're able to get insanely rich. I'm sure much richer and many more boats than the people who are alleged to have taken a little extra security money for allegedly not doing enough security work.
And as Sam Gadoldig outlined here just a couple of weeks ago, and his firm outlined here just a couple of weeks ago, the Squad and the Freedom Caucus represent some of the lowest income districts in the country, whereas the more centrists represent the higher income districts in the country. And so, yes, you see the class issues, I think, play out in different questions like these, which is a good prism to look at them through. Yeah. We should move on to Ilhan Omar.
Number 2 in the barrel.
Yes, we're continuing our tour through the scandals of the Squad and this last week of January 2024 with this video of Ilhan Omar. This is a VO, so we can start running it because she's speaking a different language. She says, my answer to Somalians was, and she's speaking to Somalians, that the U.S. government will only do, they will not do what we want and nothing else. They must follow. We Somalians must have that confidence in ourselves that we call for. We live in the U.S., pay taxes in the U.S., and have a real voice. The U.S. is a country where one of your daughters is in Congress to represent your interests. For as long as I'm there, basically, Somalia will never be in danger. Its waters will not be stolen by Ethiopia or others. The U.S. would not dare to support anyone against Somalia to steal our land. Sleep in comfort, knowing I'm here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. So that's translation that was on the bottom of the video. She's speaking to her constituents in Minnesota that are of Somalian heritage.
And so there's a fight over exactly what she said because she was
the words I just read, actually.
Right.
There's whether or not those are accurate translation of what she just said is at the heart of this.
And so she was speaking in Somali, and so a couple of Somali analysts have posted their own translations of what they say that she said, and Omar reposted one of those. So I think that's a fair one to go by. In this Spectator article, they quote, and it's also on Twitter, she said, quote, while I am in Congress, no one will take Somalia's sea. Somalia belongs to all Somalis. Somalia is one. We are brothers and sisters, and our land will not be balkanized. Our lands were taken from us before, and God willing, we may one day seek them. Mm-hmm. So what that is a reference to is on January 1st, the Ethiopia basically cut a deal with the breakaway republic, unrecognized breakaway republic of Somaliland, where Ethiopia would recognize Somaliland, which broke away from Somalia, and in exchange, Ethiopia would get access to roughly 20 kilometers of sea, because Ethiopia has been landlocked, forever, or for decades, and it is a source of kind of domestic, and national shame that they don't have, and they also have claimed, quite reasonably, that it holds back economic growth to not be able to build a port city. So they cut a deal. This is an MOU between Ethiopia and Somaliland. Somalia does not recognize Somaliland and believes that it will, retake Somaliland at some point, and so is deeply hostile. Even, we could see a hot war at some point. Yeah. Deeply hostile to this MOU, this agreement between Somaliland and Ethiopia. And so here, Omar is taking sides in that question, saying, no, the U.S. is not going to recognize this MOU. They're not going to recognize Somaliland, and we, as a Somali American population, are going to exert our lobbying influence here in the U.S. to make sure that they don't do that. Now she's getting criticized, and we can put up this next element. She's getting criticized for engaging in kind of what people call kind of greater Somalia ideology, and if you look at this kind of map that we have up, and if you're only listening on the podcast, the blue is kind of creeping into Kenya and creeping into Ethiopia, and obviously taking back Somaliland up close to Djibouti there. That's the kind of this like grand vision that some people think she was making a reference to when she said that our lands were taken from us, and one day we will get them back. And so, you've got Kenyans, Ethiopians, and Somaliland. People are like, I don't. How about not? How about we don't do that?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
So that's the context of this current controversy.
So a lot of people on the right reacted to a translation which now does appear to look like it's a mistranslation. I'm obviously not a language expert here.
It was less irredentist and less kind of aggressive than the original translation, but it does still embrace the idea that nobody's going to take Somalia's sea. So it is strict opposition to recognition of this MOU.
And one of the things the right actually latched onto even more than that in the original translation was Omar referring to herself first as Somali, then as Muslim, and then as American. I think.
And that was a mistranslation.
It appears that was a mistranslation. Yeah. Again, I'm not an expert on the language here, but Ilhan Omar herself shared the translation that you just discussed. So she seems to say that's what she was referring to. But that's what really had people on the right saying, deport her, she should be expelled from Congress. She sees herself, I will say that's a real hypocrisy problem when she's talking about in this, even in the good translation or the better translation for her, talking about our country, when she's referring to Somalia, and then talking about, quote, this country, when she's talking about the United States. It does seem as though, and I think this is perfectly natural for someone who fled their war-torn homeland and loves their native country. I understand it. I think it's a problem for somebody who criticizes the dual loyalty Israel point. That, I think, speaking of clean hits, I think that's kind of a clean hit.
And I'm all for Somali Americans lobbying their government for whatever interest they want to lobby for. One extra piece of context that has people concerned about this is that the Greater Somalia ideology is associated most with former Somali President Said Barre, who Omar's father was served under as a colonel.
Yeah.
And Barre launched a horrific genocide of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yes.
Awful, awful person. And so any association with that, any kind of hearkening back to that era, which she's not necessarily doing, but because it's in the context of this greater Somalia, it has people being, wait a minute.
It's a little militant in that big context, yeah. Now we move on to Jamal Bowman.
Jamal Bowman, a more fun one.
Yeah, this one is the more fun one. Let's put Jamal Bowman's poetry.
Was it
up
Jewish
on the
Insider
screen.
that broke this? I think it was.
It may have been, yeah. So here's Jamal Bowman's poetry. If you're listening, we'll read it for you. 2001, and he's made the stylistic decision to use debt.
Like 10, 15 years ago or something, right?
It's 2011, so long
okay.
time. So he's using slashes. 2001, planes used as missiles. Target, the Twin Towers. Later in the day, Building 7 also collapsed. Multiple explosions, heard before and during the collapse. And we can go ahead and put
He used to have a blog or something?
So you think he keeps going, allegedly, 2 other planes, the Pentagon, Pennsylvania, hijacked by terrorists, minimal damage done, minimal debris found. It's pretty, typical 9/11 trutherism, but the poetry, the vehicle of poetry, and I'd say very contemporary stylistic poetry is particularly interesting in the case of a sitting Congressman, Jamal Bowman. But you made a really good point before we started that he's a normal guy in ways other members of Congress aren't, which has actually always been my hot take on Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is that as wrong as she is on so many different things, the Beltway is just visceral hatred of her. And their visceral hatred of 9/11 trutherism, for example, which I think has been debunked. I'm sure I'll get comments on that. But for the record, that is so. It is so much more in touch with Americans around the country who have no trust and no faith left in any institutions or any government, that a lot of people really do believe this because you have given them no reason to trust your side of the story. It's kind of a normie thing.
Yeah, the late, great Michael Brooks made a great point once where he said that basically Joe Rogan and that type of person actually represents the real center of America. Like that's the centrist viewpoint, which is contradictory, confused, distrustful of government, whereas we kind of think of like the New York Times and CNN as the centrist institutions, but they're actually not.
No.
Like they represent a different segment of the population. That it's the Rogan types that are right there in the middle.
There's Weinbaum centrism and Rogan centrism, and they have some Venn diagram overlap, but not a lot.
And Jamal Bowman is a normal person.
Yes.
Like he was an independent before running for Congress. He thinks for himself, and that type of regular person in America is going to fall prey to some of these conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, it's like didn't necessarily shock me.
Checks out.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I think he in the poem maybe commended Loose Change, which is an Alex Jones documentary.
Because Alex Jones sort of started on the left.
Yeah.
With his, and that's how he got. That's how he first got famous, right?
He was really popular on the sort of fringe left during the Iraq War. Because he was questioning the military-industrial complex. So he definitely had a lot of reach.
Yeah, and Loose Change was this YouTube documentary that was just an absolute phenom. Like millions and millions of people watched it. And it has this if you can capture somebody's attention for an hour and you can cherry pick, things, and I'm sure people get mad at me too.
Well, but
the Building 7 people are going to be in our comments.
Oh, for sure. But again, that is one of the big problems here is that our government is not transparent when they always say that they're being transparent, and we really can't trust what they say. So, that's part of the issue is that even when through good journalism and other sources of primary information or primary source information and footage and video. Like, you can put the story together, but again, when the government, who you should not trust, is telling you, trust us.
Right. So Bowman is also facing an AIPAC-backed challenger, George Latimer, Westchester County executive. His race could hinge on redistricting. And so this type of thing would be more damaging in some parts of New York than other parts of New York. We'll see how those lines get drawn, you know, who comes out ahead there.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.